January 9th may sound like another ordinary date on the calendar, just another Thursday in the middle of winter, just another day in what often feels like an endless string of uncertain times. But what happens on that day could quietly shape conversations about stimulus checks, and it may carry a much bigger announcement than most people realize. Not the kind of announcement that comes with fanfare or presidential addresses, but the kind that whispers important truths about where we're really headed economically, the kind that influences decisions being made behind closed doors in Washington. If you've been worried, curious, or just plain tired of uncertainty, if you're exhausted from watching grocery prices climb while your fixed income stays the same, if you're weary of hearing promises that never seem to materialize into real help, you're not alone. You are so far from alone, and I want you to know that right from the start. My name is Susan Harper, and for more than 10 years, I've had the privilege of helping American seniors protect their savings, stretch their retirement income, and feel calmer about the future, even when the news feels confusing, even when everything around us seems designed to create anxiety rather than clarity. I never try to scare people, and I never promise things I can't prove. In a world where so many voices are shouting about guaranteed checks and imminent announcements, I refuse to add to the noise. My job, and truly my passion, is to slow everything down, explain what matters in plain English, cut through the confusion and the hype, and help you feel steadier and more confident. Because you deserve information that respects your intelligence, honors your experience, and doesn't treat you like someone who can be easily manipulated or frightened into clicking and sharing. So today, I want to walk beside you gently and calmly as we look at why January 9th matters, what it may signal about the direction our economy is heading, and what seniors like you should realistically expect. No hype, no panic, no wild promises that will leave you disappointed and frustrated when they don't come true. Just clarity, care, and perspective. Just honest conversation between two people who understand that real life doesn't operate on headlines and speculation. If you felt the pressure of higher prices, if you've watched your purchasing power shrink month after month, if you've experienced the quiet stress of wondering whether new relief might ever come again or whether you're truly on your own in this, then stay with me. Let's take a deep breath together and sort through this with clear minds and steady hearts. Here's why January 9th is even being discussed, why this particular date has been circulating in financial circles, and why it matters to anyone watching the economy closely. On that day, the government releases something called the December Jobs Report, basically a snapshot showing how many people were working, how many jobs were added or lost, and how the broader economy is behaving beneath all the political rhetoric and optimistic press releases. Normally, this report comes out earlier in the month, but because of holidays and timing, because New Year's Day falls in the middle of the typical release schedule, it lands on January 9th this time. That may not sound dramatic. It may sound like just another piece of government data that most people ignore. But for policymakers, economists, financial analysts, and yes, anyone waiting to see whether discussions about stimulus might pick back up, whether there might be genuine movement toward helping struggling households, it's an important signal. It's one of those quiet moments that doesn't make headlines but can shift the entire conversation happening in Washington. Jobs data has a way of telling a quiet truth that politicians can't easily spin away. When jobs are strong and unemployment is low, when companies are hiring confidently and paychecks are flowing steadily, Washington tends to relax. They feel less pressure to support struggling households. They can point to the numbers and say, "See? The economy is fine. People are working. Everything is recovering nicely." But when job losses grow, when companies slow hiring or announce layoffs, when unemployment ticks higher, even by small amounts, that's when lawmakers start looking for ways to stabilize things, to show they're doing something to help, to demonstrate they understand people are hurting. Sometimes that leads to conversations about relief checks, rebates, tax credits, expanded food assistance, or other forms of direct support. It doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't flip a magic switch that suddenly produces legislation and checks in the mail. But it does influence the conversation. It shifts the political calculus. It makes it harder for leaders to ignore what's happening in real households across the country. And here's where seniors come in, where this connects directly to your life and your financial security. When the job market weakens, it often means the broader economy is slowing. Slower growth can lead to rising anxiety, falling consumer confidence, and pressure on everything from retirement accounts to state budgets and benefit programs. Even if you're retired and not working anymore, even if you haven't had a job in 5, 10, or 20 years, you still feel the ripple effects everywhere you turn. You feel it at the grocery store when the same cart of food that cost $80 last year now costs $110. You feel it at the pharmacy when your copays increase or your medications aren't covered the way they used to be. You feel it with insurance premiums that seem to climb every single year, regardless of whether you've made any claims. And you feel it sometimes with housing costs, whether that's rent increases or property tax assessments or utility bills that keep creeping upward. The cost of simply existing has gone up, and for people living on fixed incomes that don't adjust quickly or adequately, that squeeze becomes tighter and tighter. And many of you are doing the same thing I see every day in my work with clients. Quietly cutting back, making compromises you never thought you'd have to make, stretching dollars in ways that would have seemed impossible a few years ago, and hoping something gives, hoping that prices stabilize, hoping that some form of relief arrives, hoping that the stress of constant financial calculation might ease even just a little bit. January 9th matters because it offers a clearer view of where we truly stand. Not the political version where everyone claims the economy is either booming or collapsing, depending on their party affiliation. Not the headline version that's designed to get clicks and shares rather than inform, but the numbers themselves. Raw data that shows what's actually happening with employment, with job creation, with the health of the labor market. Those numbers don't decide policy on their own, but they are often the first nudge that tells leaders people are struggling, that something needs attention, that ignoring the situation is no longer politically viable. So, as we move forward through this conversation, I want you to hold on to two thoughts. First, this report is important, but it's one piece of a much bigger puzzle. It's not the entire picture. It's not the final word on whether help is coming or whether you'll be okay. It's one data point among many. And second, my goal is not to make you fearful or hopeful for something that isn't guaranteed. My goal is to help you understand why this date is being talked about, how it connects to discussions about stimulus and economic support, and what it realistically means for everyday seniors trying to keep peace of mind in a very unpredictable time. We'll take this step by step together, the same way we'd walk through a complicated financial document or a confusing benefit statement, slowly and carefully until it all makes sense. When people hear words like stimulus, rebates, or relief checks, emotions can rise very quickly. Hope surges because maybe, finally, there will be some help. Frustration builds because we've heard promises before that never materialized. Skepticism sets in because it feels like nothing ever really changes for people like us. And sometimes even anger because it can feel like our struggles are being used for political theater rather than being genuinely addressed. And I understand why. I truly do. Many seniors were promised help in the past only to feel forgotten when decisions changed or programs stalled. You remember the COVID stimulus payments, the economic impact payments that actually arrived. Those were real. They made a tangible difference. But since then, there have been countless proposals, discussions, trial balloons, and political statements that led nowhere. That cycle of hope and disappointment is exhausting, and it makes it harder to trust any information about potential relief. So, let's talk about stimulus calmly, honestly, and without hype. Let's strip away the emotion for a moment and look at what stimulus actually means from a policy perspective. Stimulus simply means this: when an economy weakens, when consumer spending drops, when businesses start pulling back and the risk of recession grows, the government sometimes sends financial support to help households stay afloat and to encourage spending so businesses don't collapse. The theory is that if you put money in people's pockets, they'll spend it on necessities and maybe a few wants, and that spending keeps businesses operating. which keeps people employed, which keeps the economy moving. Sometimes it shows up as a direct check, money deposited into your bank account or mailed to your address. Sometimes it's a tax credit that you claim when you file your taxes, reducing what you owe or increasing your refund. Sometimes it's a rebate that arrives later, often tied to specific circumstances like energy costs or state budget surpluses. In history, throughout American economic policy, these programs were usually created when leaders believed the economy needed a cushion, when they felt the risk of doing nothing was greater than the risk of spending money we don't really have. But here's the part I always want my clients and you to hear very clearly, the part that matters more than anything else I'll say today. No one outside of Congress and the White House can promise when, if, or how stimulus will happen. Not a YouTube channel, not a headline in your newsfeed, not a rumor passed around on social media or in community groups. No matter how confident they sound, no matter how many capital letters and exclamation points they use, they cannot promise you money that hasn't been legislated, voted on, and signed into law. My job is never to say, get ready, the check is coming. Start planning what you'll spend it on. My job is to say, let's understand what the signs mean. Let's look at the indicators, the patterns, the political realities. Let's stay grounded in facts rather than speculation. And let's avoid making financial decisions based on hopes or assumptions. Because when we make choices from fear or impatience, when we act based on what we wish were true rather than what actually is true, that's when mistakes get expensive. That's when people take on debt, expecting to pay it off with relief money that never arrives. That's when scammers find their victims. What does make sense is understanding the pattern, recognizing how economic and political cycles typically work. When economic data weakens, when the jobs report shows losses or stagnation, when consumer confidence drops, when inflation stays stubbornly high, leaders start having conversations. When unemployment rises, when businesses slow down, when families clearly feel squeezed and start cutting back on spending, that's usually when relief programs are discussed more seriously. They're talked about in committee meetings. They're debated in caucuses. They're tested in focus groups to see how voters might respond. Again, it doesn't mean they automatically pass. It doesn't mean those discussions turn into actual legislation and actual payments. Politics is complicated. There are always competing priorities, budget constraints, philosophical differences about the role of government, but it simply means the talk becomes louder, the pressure builds, and the possibility becomes more real, even if it's not yet certain. You deserve information that respects you enough not to exaggerate anything. You deserve to be treated like the intelligent, experienced adult you are, someone who can handle nuanced information without needing it dumbed down or sensationalized. And I want you to feel empowered, not misled. If something real happens, something signed, approved, and clearly explained by official sources, then yes, we talk about it carefully and we walk through how it affects seniors specifically, what you need to do to receive it, what timeline to expect, what potential issues to watch for. Until then, we stay thoughtful, patient, and steady. We keep our feet on the ground even while we watch the sky. Over the past year, there have indeed been moments when leaders discussed different kinds of financial relief, conversations about rebates, proposals for cost of living support, ideas meant to help Americans deal with rising prices. Some proposals sounded promising on paper, some felt rushed and poorly thought through, others were more symbolic than realistic, political statements designed to generate headlines rather than genuine attempts to pass legislation. And this is where many people get confused, where the line between proposal and reality gets blurred. A lawmaker can suggest something. A president can say he supports an idea. But that doesn't make it real yet. That doesn't mean checks are being printed or bank accounts are being credited. Policies have to move through committees where they're debated and amended. They need votes in both the House and Senate, which means building majority support. They require negotiations between competing interests and different visions of what help should look like. They go through budget debates where people argue about whether we can afford it and what we might need to cut to pay for it. And sometimes they change entirely before they ever reach the public, transformed from what was originally proposed into something almost unrecognizable. I've watched seniors get emotionally whiplashed by this process, Hopeful one day when they hear about a proposal, disappointed the next when it stalls or gets changed, then hopeful again when it's revived in different form, then crushed when it finally dies in committee. They ride this roller coaster simply because someone presented a discussion as a guarantee, because headlines confused possibility with certainty. I never want that for you. I never want you to experience that cycle of hope and disappointment because someone wasn't honest about what stage a proposal is actually in. What's more important is recognizing why these discussions happen at all, what they tell us about the underlying economic reality. Leaders don't start talking about relief because everyone is fine. They don't propose stimulus when households are thriving and confidence is high. They start talking because pressure is building, because they're hearing from constituents, because the economic data is starting to concern them. They hear from working families who are struggling to afford rent and groceries. They hear from retirees who are stretching medicines, skipping doses, delaying necessary repairs, or cutting back on trips to the grocery store. They see the numbers in reports, but more importantly, they hear the stories at town halls and in their offices. Whether anything passes or not, whether these discussions ever turn into actual legislation and actual checks, the conversation itself tells us one thing very clearly. People are struggling more than the headlines sometimes admit. Beneath the rosy economic statistics about GDP growth and stock market performance, beneath the political talking points about recovery and prosperity, real people are making hard choices every single day. And that's why January 9th matters. Not because it promises free money, not because it guarantees that relief is finally coming, but because it adds another piece to the picture lawmakers are looking at when they decide whether to act. It gives them data they can't easily ignore or spin away. It puts numbers to the struggles that people have been describing anecdotally. So, as you listen to news over the coming weeks, as you hear various sources talking about stimulus and relief and economic support, I want you to hold on to perspective. When you hear someone say checks are guaranteed, this is happening. Start planning for it. Pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself whether that source has any actual authority to make such promises. When you hear someone insist on the opposite extreme, nothing will ever happen again. We're on our own. Don't waste time hoping. Pause there too. That's also an oversimplification that ignores how policy actually works. The truth often sits quietly in the middle, less dramatic than either extreme, but more accurate. Policies evolve, economic conditions change, political calculations shift, discussions come in waves, building momentum sometimes and fading other times. And through all of that complexity and uncertainty, your job is not to chase predictions or get caught up in speculation. Your job is to stay informed about what's actually happening rather than what people claim might happen. Your job is to remain calm even when others are panicking or celebrating prematurely. Your job is to stay protected by not making financial decisions based on money you don't have yet. That's what I'm here to help you do, to walk through this confusing landscape together with clear eyes and steady nerves. When we talk about January 9th, I don't want you thinking of it as a do or die moment. I don't want you lying awake the night before wondering if your financial future depends on this one report. Think of it more like turning on a light in a dim room, like pulling back a curtain to see what's actually outside rather than guessing in the darkness. The jobs report that comes out that day gives us a clearer look at whether the economy is strengthening or quietly softening underneath all the political rhetoric. If the numbers show that employers are still hiring, that unemployment is steady or even decreasing, that businesses feel confident enough to expand their workforce, then usually lawmakers feel less urgency to step in with additional support. They can tell themselves and their constituents that while people may be uncomfortable, while prices may be higher than we'd like, the system is still fundamentally working. Jobs are being created, paychecks are flowing, the engine of the economy is still running, even if it's not running as smoothly as we'd prefer. On the other hand, if the report shows job losses, even modest ones, if it shows rising unemployment, if it reveals that fewer opportunities are available for people looking for work, that's when alarms start to ring behind closed doors in Washington. not because politicians suddenly become generous or develop a deep concern for struggling families, though I'd like to believe some genuinely care, but because a weakening job market can spread into everything else like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Slower hiring can turn into weaker consumer spending because people without jobs or people worried about losing their jobs don't spend money freely. Weaker spending can hurt small businesses who depend on steady customer traffic. Struggling businesses can mean more layoffs as they try to cut costs, which creates more unemployed people, which further reduces spending, and slowly, steadily, confidence erodes. Consumer confidence drops. Business confidence drops. Investor confidence drops. That's the spiral that economists and policymakers fear most, and that's the part that gets them paying attention. Not because they suddenly become generous, but because declining economic confidence often leads to declining votes. Economic stress becomes political stress very quickly. Lawmakers who ignore obvious problems tend to face angry constituents and lose elections, so their self-interest aligns, at least temporarily, with public need. Now, there's something important to remember about December in particular, about this specific report and why we need to interpret it carefully. Many companies hire temporary workers for the holidays, seasonal staff to handle the rush of holiday shopping, extra shipping and warehouse workers to process orders, additional restaurant and hospitality staff for holiday parties and travel. And then in January, they quietly let many of those workers go because the busy season is over and they don't need the extra hands anymore. So if the jobs report comes in weak, if it shows job losses in December, it may not mean the sky is falling. It may not indicate that the economy is suddenly collapsing or that we're heading into recession. It may simply mean seasonal employment dropped off as expected, as it does nearly every December. That's why I never react to a single headline, why I never make judgments based on 1 month's data. I look for patterns. I look at multiple months. I look at revisions to older reports because the government often goes back and adjusts previous numbers as they get more complete information. I look at whether the trend is moving in one direction consistently for months at a time. That's what tells the real story beneath the monthly noise. And for seniors, that story matters because it influences markets, which affects your retirement accounts and investments. It influences benefits discussions, whether there might be cost of living adjustments or additional support programs. And it influences the mood of the entire economy, the general sense of confidence or anxiety that shapes everything from stock prices to political decisions. It's not about being afraid. It's not about assuming the worst is coming. It's about understanding the moment we're living in with clear eyes and making thoughtful choices accordingly. So if January 9th brings a strong report, if it shows robust job creation and low unemployment, we stay calm and steady. We recognize that this probably means relief discussions will remain quiet for now, but we also acknowledge that one good report doesn't erase the real struggles many households are facing. If it brings a weak report, if it shows losses or stagnation, we also stay calm. We don't panic. We don't assume disaster, but we watch more closely because that's when conversations about relief and support tend to grow louder when the political pressure builds. Either way, panic never helped anyone make a wise financial decision. Fear clouds judgment. It makes us reactive rather than thoughtful. And that's when costly mistakes happen. While all of this is unfolding, while we're watching and waiting to see what the January 9th report reveals, there are a few practical things I gently encourage every senior to keep in mind. Not because I expect the worst, not because I'm trying to scare you, but because preparation brings peace, because having a plan gives you a sense of control even when so much feels beyond your control. First, and I cannot emphasize this enough, please don't make purchases or take on debt assuming any type of stimulus check is coming. I've seen this too many times, and it breaks my heart every time. I've seen people swipe credit cards believing they'll pay it off when the stimulus money shows up, and then the money never arrives because the proposal died or the timeline stretched out far longer than expected. I've seen people agree to payment plans for furniture or appliances or repairs, confident they'll have the money soon, only to find themselves trapped in debt they can't manage. That creates stress that compounds on itself. You've got the original expense, plus fees if you miss payments, plus interest charges that make the balance grow, plus the guilt and shame that come with financial struggle. And none of that belongs on your shoulders, especially when it was based on promises someone else made that they had no authority to make. Second, take a calm look at your monthly expenses, not from a place of shame or self-criticism, not beating yourself up for past choices, but from a place of curiosity and empowerment. Are there subscriptions you don't really use anymore? Maybe a streaming service you signed up for months ago and barely watch. Maybe a magazine subscription that keeps renewing automatically. Maybe a gym membership you haven't used since before the pandemic. Insurance policies that need reviewing because your circumstances have changed or because better options might be available. Services that quietly increase their prices without you noticing, counting on the fact that most people don't check their bills carefully. Sometimes little leaks drain more than big emergencies. A $5 subscription here, a $10 fee there, an insurance premium that's $20 higher than it needs to be, they don't feel significant individually. But collectively, over a year, they can add up to hundreds or even thousands of dollars that could be used for things that truly matter. If you have even a small emergency cushion, a few $100s set aside somewhere safe, protect it like gold. Because unexpected expenses always show up at the most inconvenient time. Unexpected copays for medical procedures, car repairs that you can't postpone, appliance breakdowns, a refrigerator that stops working, or a furnace that fails in winter. Having even a small buffer makes those emergencies stressful but manageable rather than absolutely devastating. And please be extra careful with phone calls, emails, or messages claiming that stimulus checks are guaranteed if you just fill out a form or pay a fee. This is where scammers thrive, in the uncertainty, in the hope, in the desperation. Real government assistance never asks you to send money first. Real programs don't charge processing fees. Real benefits don't require you to verify your identity through suspicious links or unofficial websites. Scammers love uncertain times because fear and hope make people act quickly, make them bypass their normal caution. They call claiming to be from the Social Security Administration or the IRS. They send official-looking emails with government logos. They create websites that look legitimate. And they prey on people who are hoping so desperately for help that they want to believe it's real. I would rather you pause, take a breath, and ask a trusted person, even someone like me, before you ever give out personal information or send money. Finally, give yourself permission to adjust gently, to make changes without seeing them as failure. Maybe you postpone a purchase you were planning. Maybe you choose store brands for a while instead of name brands. Maybe you talk openly with family about your budget instead of carrying everything silently, pretending you're fine when you're actually struggling. None of those choices mean you failed. They don't mean you didn't plan well enough or save well enough or do something wrong earlier in life. They simply mean you're being wise in a season that requires wisdom, that you're adapting to circumstances that are largely beyond your control. Above all, remember this. Your dignity is not measured by your bank account, your investment portfolio, or whether a stimulus check ever arrives. Your worth as a human being has nothing to do with your financial situation. You've lived through recessions, inflation, wars, market crashes, and changes no one predicted. You've survived things that would have broken other people. You are not fragile, even if the world sometimes makes you feel that way. You are resilient. You are strong. You are worthy of dignity and respect regardless of what your bank statement says. My role is to walk beside you through this uncertain time, to share what I see in the economic data and policy discussions, and to help you stay steady when the noise gets loud, when everyone else is either panicking or making unrealistic promises. And together, as January 9th approaches, we'll keep watching calmly, thoughtfully, and with our feet planted firmly on the ground. I also want to acknowledge something that often gets left out of financial conversations, something that makes this about more than just numbers and data. This is emotional. Money isn't just numbers on a screen or paper in a wallet. It's safety. It's dignity. It's independence. It's the ability to say yes when your grandchild asks you to come visit instead of having to make excuses about why you can't afford the trip. It's medication without the agonizing calculation of whether you can afford to fill the prescription this month. It's turning the heat on without guilt, without worrying about the bill that will come next month. When prices rise and income doesn't, when the news feels uncertain and the future unclear, seniors tell me the same quiet truth over and over. Susan, I just don't want to be a burden. That sentence breaks my heart every time because most of you have spent your whole lives caring for others, raising families, showing up to jobs day after day for decades, paying taxes, doing the right thing, contributing to society in countless ways. And now in retirement, when you deserve rest and security, it can feel like the world moved on and forgot to check whether you're okay. You see politicians argue about spending while you're struggling to afford groceries. You see the cost of everything jump from one receipt to the next while your income stays frozen. You hear rumors about stimulus, vague promises about relief, and then nothing seems to happen. That roller coaster of raised hopes and crushing disappointment can make you feel small, powerless, forgotten, or left behind. And none of those feelings are wrong or unjustified. If you felt anxious lately, if you've been losing sleep over money worries, you are not weak. You are not overreacting. You are human. Uncertainty is heavy, especially when you don't have the luxury of going back to work full-time or rebuilding savings from scratch. When you're living on a fixed income that doesn't adjust to reality, when every dollar matters because there are so few of them, even small changes feel big. A $5 increase in medication copay isn't just $5. It's one less meal. A $20 utility bill increase isn't just $20. It's choosing between heat and something else you need. So give yourself grace. You are allowed to feel frustrated. You are allowed to feel tired. You are allowed to say, this is harder than it should be, because it is harder than it should be. The system wasn't designed with your current reality in mind. Policies were written decades ago when costs were different, when a dollar went further, when retirement looked different than it does now. What matters is that we don't let fear drive the steering wheel, that we don't let anxiety make our decisions for us. We make decisions slowly. We stay curious. We ask questions. We verify information before acting on it. And we remember that most seasons, even the tough ones, eventually pass. Economic conditions change. Political winds shift. New opportunities emerge. And we've survived every challenge so far, which means we can survive this one too. My goal is not to make you hopeful for something unrealistic. I will never promise you something I can't deliver. My goal is simply to help you carry the weight with more clarity and less fear, to help you understand what's actually happening so the unknown feels less overwhelming. As January 9th approaches, I'll be watching a few key details very closely, not to predict the future because no one can do that reliably, but to understand the direction we're heading and what it might mean for discussions about economic support. I'll be looking at whether new jobs were added or whether we saw losses. Even small numbers matter here. A loss of 50,000 jobs might not sound huge in an economy this size, but it represents a trend, a direction, a warning sign. I'll be paying attention to the unemployment rate because when that number rises, even by 0.1%, it often means families are feeling real stress beneath the surface. It means people are losing jobs, struggling to find new ones, cutting back on spending, worried about the future. I'll also watch something most people forget about: revisions to previous months. Sometimes the government goes back and quietly corrects older reports, adjusting the numbers as more complete information comes in. Those corrections can reveal that the trend has actually been weaker than it first appeared, that the economy hasn't been as strong as we were told. October's numbers might get revised down in the January report, showing fewer jobs created than originally claimed. That kind of pattern matters. All of these pieces together help paint a clearer picture. No single number tells the whole story, but together they reveal trends, trajectories, underlying strengths or weaknesses. What matters just as much is how leaders respond afterward, what they say and do in the days and weeks following the report. Do policymakers begin talking more seriously about relief? Do they emphasize stability and support in their speeches and statements? Or do they insist everything is fine, that there's no cause for concern, that people just need to be patient? Do economists warn that things are cooling faster than expected? Do business leaders express worry? Do consumer confidence surveys show people pulling back? These reactions matter because they tell us how seriously decision makers are taking the signals, whether they see this as a temporary blip or a more concerning trend. And when I see something meaningful, not rumors, not speculation, not some random person claiming to have inside information, but clear and verified information from official sources, I'll break it down gently, the same way I'm talking to you now. No panic, no hype, No sensational headlines. Just honest guidance that helps you understand what it means for your specific situation. Until then, the healthiest place for you to live is right here in the present. Not in anxious speculation about the future. Not in regret about the past. Right here, today, take care of your needs today. Make the best decisions you can with the information you have today. Stay cautious and thoughtful. Don't get pulled into fear by people who profit from your anxiety. Don't get swept up in unrealistic promises by people who profit from your hope. And trust that we'll keep walking through each update together, one calm conversation at a time. As we keep walking through this together, I want to remind you of something simple but powerful. Information is only helpful when it gives you peace and clarity, not panic. Not every piece of information deserves equal weight in your mind. Not every headline deserves your emotional energy. There will be channels, articles, and social media posts that shout, "Big announcement coming. Checks are guaranteed. Sign up now." And others will insist with equal certainty, "Nothing is happening. Forget it. You're on your own." Stop hoping. Both extremes usually miss the truth. The real world, the world where policy actually gets made and implemented, moves slowly. It's messy and complicated. Policies change through conversations, votes, negotiation, and compromise. They get amended, debated, stalled, revived, compromised again. The economy itself reacts in waves, not in sudden switches. Recoveries are gradual. Recessions develop over time. Nothing happens overnight, no matter what the headlines suggest. That's why I always encourage seniors to approach news like you'd approach a busy intersection. Pause. Look both ways carefully. Check for what's actually coming rather than just charging forward. Don't move just because someone behind you is honking, because someone is pressuring you to act quickly. Quick decisions based on incomplete information rarely turn out well. January 9th is worth paying attention to, absolutely. It's a meaningful data point. But it is not a finish line. It's not the moment when everything gets decided. It is simply another clue about where we're heading and how seriously leaders may start taking the financial pressure people are facing. If the numbers show weakness, it may encourage more talk about ways to support families and retirees. Bills might get introduced. Hearings might be held. Proposals might gain traction. If the numbers show strength, if the economy appears robust at least on paper, it may calm some fears even if it doesn't change the prices you see every day at the store, even if it doesn't make your personal situation any easier. Either way, your best move is to stay thoughtful, patient, and steady. Don't lock your emotions to a single date. Don't pin all your hope on one headline. Don't build your budget around money that hasn't been approved yet. And don't feel ashamed if you find yourself checking the news or worrying about what might happen. Many people are doing exactly that. You're not alone in feeling this way. The key is remembering that worry should never make financial decisions for you. Wisdom should, and wisdom always moves slower, speaks softer, and looks at the long view rather than reacting to every new piece of information. As we begin to close this conversation, I want to leave you with a sense of reassurance and perspective. January 9th is important. The jobs report matters. But your life is larger than any report. Your worth transcends any economic data. Your resilience goes deeper than any politician's decision. You have already walked through ups and downs that were far more unpredictable than this moment. You faced challenges that seemed impossible, and you found your way through them. You adapted. You learned. You kept going. And you will again, no matter what comes next. My promise to you is simple and unwavering. When something real happens, when there is genuine clarity, real legislation that's been voted on and signed, verified announcements from official sources, I will help you understand what it means in plain English without hype and without fear. I will break down how it affects you specifically, what steps you need to take, what timeline to expect. If it affects seniors directly, if there are benefits you need to claim or forms you need to fill out, we will talk about it carefully. If it doesn't, if it's just more political theater or proposals that never become real, we'll put it aside and keep focusing on what truly helps you protect your peace of mind and financial security. For now, take care of yourself. Keep your budget gentle and honest. Don't punish yourself for circumstances largely beyond your control. Stay alert to scams and anyone promising guaranteed money in exchange for fees or information. Lean on the people who care about you, whether that's family, friends, or communities like this one. And remember that feeling uncertain doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean you failed to plan properly or save enough. It just means you're human, living through challenging times that no one could have fully anticipated. And if you'd like more calm, clear guidance like this, if you want someone who will continue walking beside you through economic uncertainty with honesty and care, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. It helps other seniors find the support they deserve, the kind of straightforward information that respects their intelligence and honors their experience. The more people who see this kind of content, the fewer people fall victim to scams or make decisions based on false promises. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What is one money lesson you wish you had learned sooner? What piece of financial wisdom do you wish someone had shared with you 20 or 30 years ago? Your story may be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Your experience could be the encouragement that helps another senior feel less alone in their struggles. Our collective wisdom is powerful, and sharing it creates a community of support that extends far beyond any single video. And until we talk again, stay safe, stay steady, and remember this above all else. You've worked hard for your peace of mind, and it matters. Your well-being matters. Your security matters. Your dignity matters. Not because of what you own or what your bank account says, but because you matter as a human being who deserves respect, care, and honest information. We'll continue watching January 9th together, interpreting what it means calmly and carefully, and taking whatever comes next one thoughtful step at a time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for trusting me with your time and attention. And thank you for being part of a community that supports each other through uncertain times.